Chosen one, God said, shut your mouth. He is deadly serious about this. God is trying to do something in your life right now that your mouth keeps interrupting. I need you to sit with that for a second before I go any further. Not your circumstances, not your enemies, not the delay or the disappointment or the people who came against you, not any of the external forces you've been focused on. Your mouth. The very thing you've been using to express your faith, to tell your story, to process your pain, to explain yourself to people who asked that thing, has become the primary obstacle between you and everything God has been assembling on your behalf. And I know that sounds harsh. I know it lands sideways because you've been taught that speaking is faith. That declaring is power. That confession is the mechanism through which things shift. And there is a season where all of that is true. But there is another season, a specific critical make-or-break season in the chosen one's journey, where God's most urgent instruction is not speak more. It is stop. Be quiet. Close the loop. Stop explaining yourself. Stop rehearsing the story. Stop announcing what's coming before it arrives. Stop giving the wrong people access to what is sacred through the very words coming out of your mouth. And when I say God is deadly serious about this, I mean that the difference between receiving what has been prepared for you and watching it evaporate one more time may come down entirely to what you choose to say, and not say in the season you are currently in. This is not a casual suggestion. This is an urgent warning, and it was sent specifically for you. Let me describe something to you. Think about the last time you were genuinely excited about something that was coming, a breakthrough, a connection, an opportunity, a shift you could feel building beneath the surface of your life that finally felt like the real thing. And think about what you did with that excitement. You told someone, maybe several someones. You shared the vision before it had walls. You described the dream before it had a foundation. You talked about what was coming in rooms that weren't ready for it, to people who hadn't yet proven themselves safe containers for something that is fragile and that is sacred. And then something happened. Not always a dramatic betrayal, sometimes just a look. A response that was less enthusiastic than you needed. A subtle doubt deposited by someone who meant well but didn't believe at your level. A careless word from someone you trusted that lodged itself in the soft tissue of your hope and began quietly to infect it. And the thing you had been building faith toward, the thing you could feel before you spoke it, started to feel less certain, less real, further away than it had been before you opened your mouth. That is not coincidence. That is the pattern that God has been watching happen in your life repeatedly, that He has been trying to interrupt with an instruction you've been too busy talking to fully receive. The mouth that speaks before the season is ready doesn't just waste words. It releases something precious before it's protected. It opens a door to interference that was closed as long as the thing was kept in the interior. It invites opinion and energy and influence into a space that was never meant to be a democracy. And you have paid for that pattern with delays you didn't understand, with betrayals that blindsided you, with visions that dissolved before they fully formed, not because the vision wasn't real, but because it was spoken into the wrong atmosphere at the wrong time to the wrong people. That ends today. The sacred power of what has not yet been spoken before anything in this physical world exists. It exists in potential, in the invisible, in the unmanifest realm where things are real but not yet visible, powerful but not yet touchable, complete but not yet delivered. And in that state, before they are spoken, before they are announced, before they are made vulnerable to the atmosphere of other people's belief systems and doubts and agendas, they are protected. There is a specific Hebrew concept that captures this perfectly. The word sod, which means secret, or the counsel of the intimate. It describes the things God shares with those He is close to in the quiet of private communication. Not for broadcasting, not for debate, not for public consumption before they are ready. For holding, for stewarding, for honoring with the sacred container of silence until they are strong enough to survive the open air. Your dreams, the real ones, the deep ones, the ones that arrived not as ambition but as assignment, are so. They are sacred counsel. They are the private communication of a God who chose you specifically to carry something specific and entrusted it to you before the world was ready to receive it. And every time you release what is so into the ears of people who were not designated to receive it, you are not being faithful. You are being careless with something holy. The unspoken dream has a power that the announced dream does not. Think about a seed. In the ground, unannounced, unseen, protected by darkness, it builds everything it needs to become what it was designed to be. Pull it out of the ground early and expose it to open air, and it withers before it can become. Not because it wasn't real, because it was exposed before it was ready. Your silence right now is not weakness. It is not fear. It is not the absence of faith. It is the ground, and the right things are growing in it. What your words have been costing you, the invisible tax of speaking too soon. Every word you speak carries a cost. And in the specific season you are in, where God is assembling something that requires precise conditions to arrive, intact, the words you speak prematurely are being taxed at a rate that is taking more from you than you realize. The first cost is energy. When you speak a vision before it has fully formed inside you, you release the energy of it before you've finished building it. The excitement, the faith, the creative fuel that was meant to be channeled entirely into the building instead gets distributed through conversation, through explanation, through the performance of enthusiasm for an audience that receives it passively while you burn the fuel actively. You've felt this. The thing that felt electric before you talked about it felt somehow diminished after. Not because the thing changed, because the energy changed. It went outward when it needed to stay inward. The second cost is clarity. There is a specific kind of knowing that only exists in silence. The deep, uninterrupted, interior knowing that arrives when you stop talking long enough to hear it. The moment you begin explaining your vision to other people, you inevitably start shaping it for the audience rather than for the truth. You edit it. You emphasize the parts that will land well, and downplay the parts that will be questioned. And slowly, without meaning to, you drift from the original vision into a version of it that was designed to be received rather than one that was designed to be real. The silence preserves the clarity. The talking dilutes it. The third cost, and this is the most dangerous one, is protection. Every person you tell about what is coming gives that information a new owner. And not every owner of your vision will steward it with care. Some will doubt it in front of you. Some will doubt it privately in ways that generate a spiritual atmosphere around your dream that it was never designed to survive. Some will take the information and use it in ways you didn't authorize and couldn't anticipate. Silence is armor. And right now, God is asking you to put it on. The specific people your mouth has been feeding, who don't deserve the information, this is the section that's going to require the most honesty from you. And I'm going to ask you to be brave enough to really look at it rather than skip past it to something more comfortable. There are specific people in your life who have been receiving information about your dreams, your plans, your expectations, your conversations with God, people who have not proven themselves worthy of that information. Not because they are terrible people, but because their particular combination of their own insecurities, their own unresolved doubts, their own wounds and limitations means that what you give them, they cannot hold with care. Maybe it's a family member whose love for you is real, but whose faith for your specific vision is non-existent. They pray for you in general and doubt you in particular. And every time you tell them what you're believing for, something in their response too subtle to call out directly, but too present to ignore, deposits a question mark into your faith that takes weeks of prayer to remove. Maybe it's a friend who has their own unfulfilled dreams and whose genuine happiness for your breakthrough is complicated by their own waiting. So their response to your good news has a quality to it, supportive on the surface, slightly deflating underneath, that you've learned to overlook because you love them and they love you, and the whole thing is too complicated to address. Maybe it's someone you barely know who you find yourself oversharing with because something in you needs to say the thing out loud to make it feel real. And in meeting that need, you give a stranger access to something sacred that they did nothing to earn and will do nothing to protect. God is asking you to make a list, not out loud, not to anyone, internally, of the people who receive what is meant to stay private. And He is asking you, one conversation at a time, to stop feeding them what is not theirs to hold. This is not bitterness. This is not punishment. This is discernment. And discernment right now is the difference between your next chapter arriving intact, arriving compromised. The biblical pattern, every major breakthrough in Scripture, was preceded by strategic silence. Let me take you through something that will permanently change how you read the stories you grew up hearing. because the pattern is so consistent once you see it that you'll wonder how you missed it. Joseph had the dream at 17. God showed him in vivid, unmistakable imagery exactly what his life was going to become. And he did something that cost him enormously, he told his brothers. He poured the sacred dream into an environment that was not safe for it, and the resulting interference set him on a 13-year detour through betrayal and imprisonment before the Dakor, but fulfilled in a context that had been purified of the people who were not meant to be part of it. The lesson of Joseph is not that dreams should never be shared. It's that dreams shared before their time, in the wrong room, suffer consequences. Mary, when the angel told her she would carry something unprecedented, something no human language had words for, yet the first thing she did was treasure it in her heart. She didn't run to the marketplace to announce it. She didn't call a meeting. She sat with it. She protected it. She let it grow in the interior before it was required to survive the exterior. And the thing that was being formed in her was protected until it was strong enough to announce itself. David was anointed king while still a shepherd boy. The prophet came, the oil was poured, the designation was given. And then David went back to the sheep. He didn't launch a campaign. He didn't start telling Saul's servants what he knew about his future. He returned to the place of preparation and let the interior knowing work on him in silence until the season for its expression arrived naturally, powerfully, and without the damage that premature announcement would have caused. The pattern is undeniable. God announces to the interior first, and the exterior catches up. On his timeline, not yours. Your job is not to help God's timeline by spreading the news early. Your job is to let the interior preparation complete itself in the protection of your silence. What God is actually building while you're quiet, the invisible construction, I need you to understand what is happening right now in the silence, because the silence without understanding feels like nothing. And the chosen one who doesn't understand what their silence is producing will break it too soon. While you are quiet, while you are not explaining yourself, not announcing what's coming, not filling every room with the story of your journey, God is building. He is building the structure that the blessing requires to be sustainable. Financial breakthroughs that arrive before the character to hold them produces disaster. Relationships that arrive before the healing of the wounds that would sabotage them produce more pain. Platform and influence that arrive before the interior depth too. Handle them produces collapse. He is building in you in the silence. Through the silence, the structure that makes what's coming something you can keep, rather than something that passes through your hands. He is building the right environment for the arrival, moving people, repositioning circumstances, aligning the specific conditions that your specific breakthrough requires so that when it comes into an atmosphere that can receive it rather than one that would reject or damage it. That environmental work requires silence from you because every announcement you make too early shifts the atmospheric conditions in ways that require recalibration. And he is building your trust, not your intellectual agreement with the concept of trust. The actual, tested, fire-proved, silence-forged trust of a person who has held something sacred in the interior long enough to discover that they can. That the vision doesn't die when they stop talking about it. That God doesn't need them to. Manage the process through their words. That the faith that holds quietly is more powerful than the faith that announces loudly. The silence is not empty. It is full. Fuller than any conversation you could be having. The difference between holy silence and fearful silence, getting this right, because I don't want you to leave this message and go into a fearful, paranoid, trust no one version of silence that produces isolation rather than protection. I need to make a critical distinction. There is a silence that comes from fear, from the wound that says no one can be trusted, from the experience of being burned enough times that withdrawal becomes the default, from the belief that relationship itself is the danger and isolation is the solution. That silence is not what God is asking for. That silence is a prison dressed as wisdom. And then there is holy silence, discerning silence, the chosen, deliberate, spirit-led silence of a person who has learned not from fear but from wisdom. What is sacred and what is shareable? Who has developed the discernment to know which conversations are going to add to the vision and which ones are going to cost it something it can't afford to lose? Who has enough peace in their interior that they don't need the external validation of someone else's enthusiasm to believe in what God told them? Holy silence is not isolation. You can be deeply connected, genuinely in community, fully present in relationships, and still be perfectly selective about what you bring into those spaces. You are allowed to have friends and not tell every friend everything. You are allowed to be in community and not make the community a sounding board for what is meant to stay between you and God. You are allowed to share your life without sharing your sacred assignments. The question to ask before you speak is not, "Do I want to say this?" It is not even, "Is this person safe enough to hear it?" The question is, "Does speaking this serve the thing itself, or does it only serve my need to have said it?" If the honest answer is the second one, if what's driving the impulse is your need for validation, your anxiety about whether it's real, your desire to make it more concrete by saying it out loud, then that is the signal to be quiet and bring that need to God instead. He will answer it more reliably than any conversation ever could. What happens when you finally go quiet, the shift that silence produces? Let me describe what happens when the chosen one genuinely, fully, obediently goes quiet in the way God is requesting. Not as a theory, as something that is going to happen in your actual lived experience if you apply this. The first thing that happens is an immediate sense of relief that surprises you, because carrying the weight of managing other people's perceptions of your vision, of monitoring how every conversation about your future is landing, of adjusting the story based on who's in the room is exhausting in a way you don't fully recognize until you put it down. The silence lifts that weight, and the relief of it will feel like evidence that you made the right choice. The second thing that happens is clarity arrives in the interior with a sharpness it hasn't had in a while. When you stop pouring your vision out into conversations, it stays inside you and builds. The details that were vague become specific. The direction that was general becomes precise. The thing you've been believing for becomes more concrete in your spirit the longer it's allowed to mature in silence, rather than being constantly processed and reprocessed in conversation. The third thing, and this is the one that will take your breath away, is that movement begins in the invisible world almost immediately. Because the silence isn't passive. It is an act of obedience. And God responds to obedience in your circumstances with movement that you didn't produce through effort or strategy or conversation. Doors open, connections appear, opportunities arrive through channels you weren't monitoring because you were too busy talking. The things that were being held back, waiting for the conditions of your silence to create the right environment, begin releasing. Not all at once, but unmistakably. In a sequence that makes clear that what's moving is not coincidence. It was waiting for your quiet. I need to have an honest conversation with you about spiritual warfare, because it applies directly to what we're talking about, and I think you need to understand the mechanism. The enemy of your destiny does not have the power to stop what God has ordained for your life. That is settled. What has been written cannot be unwritten. What has been destined cannot be cancelled by any force that operates below the authority of the one who wrote it. But the enemy does have a strategy. And it is one of the oldest, most effective, most consistently successful strategies in the entire spiritual playbook. Get you to say it yourself, because your words carry authority. Not just spiritual authority in the abstract, literal, creative, atmospheric authority in the physical world you inhabit. The words you speak shape the environment around you. They set expectations in the minds of the people who hear them. They create emotional commitments that are painful to back away from when circumstances don't cooperate with the timeline you announced. They give information to people who can use it in ways you never intended. And so the strategy is this. Create enough anxiety, enough need for validation, enough excitement that overrides wisdom, and get you to announce what is sacred before it is protected, before it has walls, before the season for its arrival has been fully prepared. Once you've spoken it prematurely, the enemy doesn't need to do much else. The doubt of one person you told too early is enough. The subtle discouragement of one unsafe relationship that now has information it wasn't meant to have is enough. The atmospheric shift of a dream that was protected by silence being exposed to open air before its time is enough. The most dangerous weapon being used against your breakthrough is not the people who came against you. It's not the delay. It's not any external force. It's your own mouth, speaking at the wrong time to the wrong people about the wrong things. Reclaim it. Guard it. Use it intentionally. The enemy cannot fight a chosen one who has learned to be strategically silent. how to handle the pressure to speak practical tools for the season ahead, because this instruction is going to be tested by your own need for connection, by people who push for information you've chosen not to give, by the anxiety of carrying something important in silence. Let me give you practical tools for the specific pressure points you're going to face. When someone asks about your plans and you feel the pull to overshare, practice the complete answer that gives nothing essential away. God is working on some things, and I'm trusting the process is a full, honest, closed sentence. It does not invite follow-up questions. It does not create an opening for doubt or influence. It honors the relationship without feeding what is sacred to someone who cannot steward it. When the anxiety about whether it's real rises and the impulse to talk about it spikes, redirect that impulse into your journal or your prayer. Write it out instead of speaking it out. The act of writing serves the same clarifying function as conversation without distributing the vision to an external audience. God can hear your processing. You don't need a human intermediary for it. When someone you love genuinely presses and you feel guilty about the boundary, remember that protecting what is sacred is an act of love for yourself, for them, and for the relationship itself. The chosen one who speaks too soon and then watches the dream dissolve cannot give that relationship what it would have received from the chosen one who protected the dream to completion. Your silence is serving your relationships even when it doesn't feel that way from the inside. And when the silence feels unbearable, when the interior weight of carrying something significant alone becomes almost too heavy, go directly to the source. Sit with God in the specific quiet that the silence creates. Let him be the voice that confirms. Let him be the enthusiasm that validates. Let him be the relationship in which the vision is spoken freely, fully, and without any of the costs that speaking it to humans in this season carries. He already knows it. He's the one who gave it to you. Tell him about it. Let that be enough. I want to take you forward now, past the silence, past the discipline of the held tongue and the protected dream and the season of sacred quiet, into the arrival. Because this is what the silence is for. Not silence as a permanent state. Not silence as the destination. Silence as the final preparation before the door opens. And everything that has been assembled in the invisible walks through it into your visible life. The arrival of the thing you've been protecting in silence has a quality that things announced prematurely never have. It lands with a weight and a completeness and a sense of rightness that cannot be manufactured through effort or engineered through strategy. It simply arrives, fully formed, in the right environment, with the right people already positioned around it, with the resources it needs already aligned, with the circumstances already prepared to receive it rather than resist it. And when it comes, when the door opens and what was silent becomes suddenly visible and real and undeniable, you will understand completely why the silence was required. You will look back at every moment you almost spoke too soon and feel something close to gratitude for the restraint, because you will be able to see, with the clarity that comes from standing in the outcome, exactly how much would have been lost if the protection of the silence had been broken. The people who tried to get you to talk about it too early will see it arrive and know they were never given the inside information. And there will be a peace in that, not a vindictive peace, but the clean, settled peace of a person who honored what was sacred and received the full, undamaged version of what was being prepared. You protected it, and it arrived whole. That wholeness, that specific, precious, hard-won wholeness that only comes from the discipline of silence in the season, when silence was the most important act of faith available, is yours. And it was worth every single quiet day of it. I want to leave you with something simple and direct, not complicated, not a list. Not one more thing to manage, just this. The next time you feel the impulse to speak about what is sacred to announce, to explain, to share, to validate what God told you through the ears of someone who didn't hear it, pause. Just pause. And in that pause, ask one honest question. Does saying this serve the thing, or does it only serve me? If the answer is the second, if what's driving the impulse is your need to be understood, your anxiety about whether it's real, your desire to make the invisible visible through the act of saying it out loud, then make a different choice. Choose the silence. Choose the protection. Choose the obedience that trusts God enough to let him do what he said he would do without your help, without your announcement, without the management of your mouth in a season he specifically asked you to close it. Because what is coming for you, what has been assembled, protected, prepared, and held in trust for the version of you that has finally learned to be quiet, is too important to risk on a conversation that serves your anxiety more than your assignment. Shut your mouth. Not in defeat, not in fear, not in the silence of someone who has given up believing. In the bold, trusting, faith-filled silence of someone who knows without needing to say it out loud to anyone that God is working, that the plan is real, that the arrival is coming, that the protection of the silence is the last act of preparation before the door swings open. He is deadly serious about this, and so should you be. If this message landed in a place that felt like a direct word for your life today, if something in you recognized the instruction and knew it was time to receive it, you didn't find this accidentally. Subscribe and stay close, because every message in this space is written for the chosen one who is ready for the full truth, not just the comfortable parts. Subscribe. The best things in your life are still unspoken. Keep them that way.